The research vessel Star Mapper hung silently in Earth's orbit, its advanced cloaking system making it invisible to the primitive radar systems below. Captain Smith, who had chosen his name from intercepted human broadcasts, stood on the bridge with his 4 arms crossed, all 3 of his eyes focused on the blue planet below. "Fascinating," he muttered, watching the countless lights of human cities twinkling in the planet's night side. A species that hasn't even achieved unified planetary government, yet they've managed to blanket their world with artificial illumination. His science officer, Jones, approached with a datapad. Like all members of their species, Jones had metallic blue skin that shimmered under the ship's lights. "Captain, we've identified an ideal subject for our first close-up study. A human male from what they call a small town. Less chance of our presence being noticed." The target was Thomas "Tom" Miller, a 45-year-old human who lived alone at the edge of Pine Creek. Population 2,187. The data showed he worked as a local handyman, fixing everything from broken doors to faulty electrical systems. What the aliens missed in their data was one crucial detail. Tom had spent 20 years in the military as a mechanical engineer before retiring to his quiet life. "Perfect," Captain Smith said, his upper arms gesturing at the view screen while his lower ones adjusted his uniform. "Prepare the extraction beam. Remember, this is a primitive species. They probably won't even understand what's happening until it's over." At 2:47 a.m. Earth time, the extraction beam activated, targeting Tom's bedroom. The aliens expected to find their subject asleep, like any sensible being would be at that hour. Instead, they found Tom in his garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle engine because he couldn't sleep and might as well get some work done. The beam caught Tom right in the middle of adjusting a bolt with his favorite wrench, a heavy-duty tool that had been with him through 3 wars and countless repair jobs. As the shimming blue light surrounded him, Tom didn't panic. 20 years of military service had taught him that panicking was never the best first response to any situation. Instead, he observed. The beam was lifting him upward, counteracting Earth's gravity. The wrench in his hand felt lighter too, but it was still under the same gravitational effect as he was. "Interesting," Tom mumbled, thinking like an engineer rather than a victim. As he was pulled into the ship through an opening portal, Tom noticed the subtle vibrations in the beam, the way it seemed to pulse in regular intervals. His mind quickly connected it to the gravity manipulation systems he'd worked on in experimental military projects. They had never got them working properly, but the principles were the same. The aliens waited eagerly as their subject was transported to the examination room. They expected fear, confusion, maybe even primitive religious awe. What they didn't expect was for their ship's artificial gravity to suddenly go haywire. Tom had used the wrench to strike the exact point where the extraction beam interfaced with the ship's gravity control systems, hitting it at precisely the frequency needed to create a resonance cascade. He'd figured out the weak point by simply watching how the energy patterns flowed through the ship's visible architecture during his brief trip upward. Chaos erupted on the bridge as everything that wasn't bolted down began floating. Captain Smith and his crew, used to perfectly controlled artificial gravity, found themselves tumbling through the air. Warning alarms blared as the ship's systems tried to compensate for the unexpected disruption. "How is this possible?" Jones shouted, trying to grab onto a floating console. "They're a pre-space flight species." Through the ship's internal cameras, they watched in horror as Tom calmly used the zero-gravity environment to propel himself through their corridors, collecting pieces of technology as he went. He moved with the precision of someone who had trained for space operations, even though he'd never been in space before. By the time they managed to restore gravity control, Tom had disappeared, taking with him several pieces of their superior technology and leaving behind a single note written on a piece of paper from his pocket. "Thanks for the interesting night. Left a few suggestions for improving your gravity system, drawn on the back of this note. Tom." Captain Smith stared at the note, then at the detailed technical drawings on its reverse side. For the first time in his career, He began to wonder if perhaps they had severely underestimated this primitive species. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Research Alliance was silent as Captain Smith's report appeared on the massive holographic display. All 50 council members, representing the most advanced species in the known galaxy, leaned forward in their floating chairs to read the damage assessment. This, Captain Smith's voice shook slightly as he addressed the council, is what a single human managed to do to our ship in less than 15 minutes. His blue skin had taken on a distinctly pale shade, a sign of stress in his species. The report scrolled across the screen. Primary gravity control system, compromised. Secondary gravity backup, partially disassembled. Tertiary emergency systems, missing, stolen. Engineering deck, multiple components removed. Ship's manual, downloaded. How did they even access our computer system? Note, human left behind technical suggestions for improving our gravity drive efficiency. Council member first, the oldest and wisest of the group, cleared his throat. Captain Smith, are you suggesting that a primitive being from a pre-space flight civilization not only defeated your crew, but also offered engineering advice? Yes, sir. Captain Smith projected an image of Tom's handwritten notes. Our engineers have reviewed his suggestions. They would improve our gravity drive efficiency by 23%. Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. Council member third, known for her skepticism, spoke up. This is clearly an exaggeration. Perhaps your crew was undertrained, or your systems were already malfunctioning. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Tom Miller sat in his garage, surrounded by alien technology. He had spread the stolen components across his workbench, next to his trusty wrench. 3 empty coffee cups testified to his overnight work session. Interesting, he muttered, carefully dismantling a piece of the gravity control system. They overcomplicated it. All these extra steps just to do something simple. He reached for his phone and called his old military buddy, Bill. Hey Bill, remember that experimental gravity project we worked on 15 years ago? The one that kept exploding. Well, I finally figured out what we did wrong. Back in the council chamber, the debate was getting heated. Council member 7th waved all 6 of his arms in frustration. We cannot accept this report. It would undermine everything we know about technological progression. Species must develop in the correct order. First agriculture, then writing, then basic machines, then spaceflight. Humans still fight wars over primitive resources. Captain Smith activated another holographic display. With respect, council member, the human didn't just damage our ship. He improved it. And according to our latest scans, he paused, his 3 eyes blinking nervously. He's already started rebuilding our technology with local materials. The display showed Tom's garage, where he had successfully created a small anti-gravity field using parts from his motorcycle, a microwave oven, and some of the stolen alien tech. He was using it to float his coffee cup while he worked. Impossible, several council members shouted at once. We must send a military vessel, council member 3rd declared. Clearly, this situation requires a more forceful approach. First raised his hand for silence. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that our understanding of human capabilities is flawed. Captain Smith's report suggests they possess an unusual ability to understand and adapt technology. They're dangerous, Smith added quietly, not because they're violent, though our cultural studies suggest they can be, but because they're unpredictable. They don't follow the normal rules of technological development. They improvise. The council voted 49-1 to dispatch a military vessel, dismissing Smith's warnings as the product of a traumatized mind. Only First voted against it, troubled by the image of that floating coffee cup. As the council adjourned, Smith watched the final clips from his ship's security footage. Tom Miller, calmly working out their gravity control systems while floating in zero, whistling a tune and occasionally pausing to take notes. It wasn't the actions of the human that truly frightened Smith. It was how much he seemed to be enjoying himself. Commander Gray stood on the bridge of the Star Enforcer, the most advanced military vessel in the Galactic Fleet. Unlike Captain Smith's research ship, this was a proper warship, bristling with weapons and staffed by trained military personnel. The commander smiled, showing his metallic blue teeth. "Prepare the intimidation display," he ordered. "Let's show these primitives what real power looks like." The massive ship decloaked directly over New York City in broad daylight. It was nearly 2 miles long, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light. Panic erupted in the streets below as people pointed up at the massive vessel. What Commander Gray didn't expect was the calm voice that came through his ship's communication system just 30 seconds later. "This is General Roberts of Earth's Combined Defense Force. I see you've chosen to make quite an entrance. We were wondering when you'd show up." Gray's smile faltered. "How are they communicating with us? They shouldn't have the technology to." "Oh, that's thanks to Tom." The general's voice continued cheerfully. "He's been quite helpful these past few weeks. In fact, we've made some interesting modifications to those gravity systems he borrowed. Would you like a demonstration?" Before Gray could respond, his sensors detected something rising from multiple points on Earth's surface. They looked like ordinary human satellites, except they were moving in ways that should have been impossible for such primitive technology. "Impossible," Gray's science officer whispered. "They've adapted the gravity drive technology into a propulsion system. But they've simplified it somehow, made it more efficient." The human satellites took up formation around the Star Enforcer. They were clearly armed, but with a bizarre mixture of human and alien technology. One appeared to be partially made from what looked like an old television antenna. "Now," General Roberts continued, "we could do this the hard way. Or you could land that impressive ship of yours at our facility in Nevada, and we could discuss things over coffee. Tom's particularly interested in talking to your engineers about something he calls unnecessarily complicated design choices." Gray's crew looked at him in confusion. This wasn't how first contact scenarios were supposed to go. The primitives were supposed to be shocked, afraid, maybe even worshipful. Instead, they seemed amused. "This is a trick," Gray declared. "They cannot possibly have." His words were cut off as one of the human satellites emitted a focused gravity pulse, causing all the liquid in the Star Enforcer's port side to float upward. The crew watched in horror as their drinks, hydraulic systems, and even the water in their bodies shifted slightly to the right. "That was about 2% power," Roberts said casually. "Tom calls it the coffee float setting. Shall we try 5%? In the background, Gray could hear someone who must have been Tom Miller saying, "You know, their power distribution system looks pretty complicated too. Bet we could help them streamline that." Commander Gray, trained military officer with 30 years of experience, felt a bead of sweat roll down his blue forehead. The humans hadn't just adapted the stolen technology. They'd improved it, simplified it, and turned it into something new. And they'd done it in weeks, not the decades or centuries it should have taken. "Perhaps," Gray said carefully, "we should accept your invitation for coffee." "Wonderful choice," Roberts replied. "Oh, and Tom wants to know if your engineers would be interested in looking at his sketches for something he calls a gravity catapult. Says it might revolutionize space travel once he works out how to stop it from turning passengers into what he calls human soup." As the Star Enforcer followed its escort to Nevada, Gray realized with growing unease that humans weren't just dangerous because they could adapt advanced technology. They were dangerous because they seemed to genuinely enjoy making things work in ways they were never meant to work. "Send an urgent message to the council," he whispered to his communications officer. "Tell them we're going to need a new approach, and possibly some coffee." Dr. White sat in his hastily assembled research station in Nevada, staring at his data pad with all three eyes wide open. Around him, his team of alien scientists were frantically updating their reports as they observed the humans going about their daily lives. The council had finally decided that a proper scientific study was needed after the military intervention had ended with Commander Gray taking coffee brewing lessons from Tom Miller. "This cannot be correct," Dr. White muttered, checking his readings again. "According to our biological scans, humans regularly consume substances that should be lethal to most life forms." He watched through the observation window as a group of humans in the facility's break room drank their morning coffee. His sensors indicated the beverage contained enough caffeine to paralyze a small animal, yet the humans were complaining it wasn't strong enough. One of his junior researchers, Dr. Brown, rushed in with another alarming report. "Sir, you need to see this. We've been monitoring their entertainment channels, and—" He paused, his metallic blue skin paling. "They jump out of perfectly functional aircraft. For fun." "What?" Dr. White grabbed the datapad. The screen showed humans skydiving, bungee jumping, and participating in something called extreme sports. But why would they deliberately put themselves in danger when there's no survival benefit? "That's not even the strangest part," Brown continued. "Remember that gravity catapult Tom Miller was working on? The one that might turn users into human soup. 3 humans have already volunteered to test it once it's ready." Dr. White added these observations to his growing list of human abnormalities. 1. Only known species to develop music before written language. 2. Can survive injuries that would be fatal to most species. 3. Deliberately seeks out dangerous situations for entertainment. 4. Tests unknown substances by eating them to see what happens. 5. Shows excitement rather than fear when encountering new technology. At that moment, Tom Miller walked into the research station, carrying his ever-present wrench and a box of donuts. The alien scientist had learned that offering food was a human custom for social bonding, though they were still baffled by the concept of deep-frying dough and covering it in sugar. "Morning, docs," Tom said cheerfully. "Thought you might want to see something interesting. We took that medical scanner of yours apart and found out it works great for making pizza if you reverse the particle flow." Dr. White's third eye twitched. "You turned a medical scanner into a cooking device?" "Well, yeah," Tom shrugged. "It heats things much more evenly than a microwave. Plus, it plays music now. Not sure why, but it seems to make the pizza taste better." Dr. Brown frantically added to his notes, "Humans modify advanced technology for food preparation and entertainment purposes. See no issue with combining unrelated functions." A young human scientist walked by, casually drinking something that Dr. White's sensors identified as energy drink, a mixture of chemicals that should, by all rights, cause immediate cardiac arrest. "Oh, and we figured out why your ships kept having that power fluctuation problem," Tom continued, pulling out some sketches he'd drawn on a napkin. "You guys overcomplicate everything. Look, if you just bypass the tertiary power coupling and run it straight through what we're calling the coffee maker circuit, you get 40% more efficiency." Dr. White stared at the napkin. The human had solved a power distribution problem that had puzzled their engineers for centuries, and he'd drawn the solution while apparently eating something called a burger. "Dr. Brown," White said quietly, "update the report to the council. Humans aren't just adapting our technology, they're playing with it. Like children with new toys, except the toys are highly advanced scientific devices, and they're making them better by ignoring all the rules of proper engineering." "Should we be worried?" Brown asked. They watched as Tom used his wrench to open a panel on their food synthesizer, humming happily. "I wonder if this thing can make ice cream," he mused. "No," Dr. White replied, reaching for one of the donuts. "I think we should be taking notes." The alien cultural research team sat in horrified silence as they watched the video playing on their holographic screen. A human was deliberately walking on a thin rope suspended between 2 mountains, thousands of feet in the air. "And they do this for entertainment?" asked lead cultural researcher Green, her blue skin turning slightly green from anxiety. "Yes," Dr. White replied. "They call it slacklining. But that's not even the most concerning part. Watch this next video. The screen changed to show humans in wingsuits flying dangerously close to mountainsides. Another clip showed people surfing on enormous waves. Then came footage of people eating something called ghost peppers while their friends laughed. "I don't understand," Green said. "Are they being punished?" "No," Dr. White sighed. "They're doing it for something called YouTube views." The research team had been studying human culture for 3 weeks now, and each day brought new surprises. They'd already had to create a new category in their species database: things humans do for fun that would be considered torture on other planets. Their confusion only grew when Tom Miller invited them to what he called a weekend barbecue. The aliens watched in fascination as humans gathered in his backyard, deliberately burning food over open flames, a practice that had died out on most civilized planets millennia ago. "Try this burger," Tom said cheerfully, offering a plate to Dr. White. "I used your matter resequencer to age the beef instantly. Works better than traditional aging, and it makes the meat extra tender." Dr. White stared at the device that was supposed to be used for analyzing stellar phenomena. Tom had somehow modified it to improve food preparation. Again. "Oh, and watch this," Tom continued, pressing a button. The gravity field generators he'd rebuilt now created a perfect zero-gravity sphere above the pool. Children squealed with delight as they floated in the bubble, playing something they called space volleyball. Green frantically took notes on her pad. Humans convert advanced scientific equipment into recreational devices within hours of obtaining access. Show no fear of potential molecular dissolution. The day got even more interesting when Bill, Tom's old military buddy, arrived with what he called a little project, a hover-converted classic car that used a combination of alien gravity tech and what appeared to be parts from a washing machine. The washing machine parts were necessary, Bill explained to the bewildered aliens. They help with the spin cycle when taking sharp turns. Green pulled Dr. White aside. "This goes against everything we know about technological development. They're not just adapting our technology, they're playing with it." "Indeed," Dr. White replied, watching as Tom used the matter resequencer to create what he called instant ice cream for the kids. They treat highly advanced technology the way other species treat simple tools. No reverence, no fear, just curiosity and creativity. Later that evening, as the humans gathered around what they called a bonfire, deliberately creating fire for social purposes, another baffling concept, the research team made their most disturbing discovery yet. According to these readings, Green whispered, their bodies release pleasure chemicals when they encounter potentially dangerous situations. They're literally addicted to exploration and risk-taking. Dr. White watched as Tom explained to a group of fascinated children how he'd modified the alien gravity drive. The kids were asking surprisingly intelligent questions about quantum mechanics while roasting something called marshmallows in the fire. "Perhaps," Dr. White said thoughtfully, "that's not necessarily a bad thing. Look at how quickly their children grasp complex concepts. They're not afraid to ask what if or why not, questions that our species learned to stop asking long ago." Green looked horrified. "Are you suggesting their apparent madness is actually beneficial?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. White replied, accepting a plate of what Tom called s'mores, that we might have been doing things wrong all along. In the background, Bill's hover car backfired, creating a small antimatter burst that turned all the marshmallows blue. The humans cheered and immediately began trying to reproduce the effect, while the alien researchers added another item to their list. Humans viewed technical malfunctions as opportunities for snack food improvement. Word spread quickly through the galactic community. Within months, ships from dozens of alien civilizations arrived to observe Earth. They all left with the same conclusion. Humans were simultaneously the most fascinating and terrifying species they had ever encountered. The hive mind of Beta Centauri sent their most advanced research vessel. They returned 3 days later, their collective consciousness struggling to process how humans could function without a unified mind, yet still manage to innovate so quickly. They argue constantly, the Hive reported to the Council. They disagree about everything. Yet somehow this conflict drives them to create better solutions. It makes no sense. The crystal beings of Rigel sent their diplomatic team, hoping to establish trade relations. They departed after watching humans turn their crystalline technology into something called disco balls for parties. The fact that this actually improved the technology's efficiency only made it more disturbing. Tom Miller's garage had become an unofficial interstellar innovation center. Alien engineers would arrive with their most advanced technology, only to watch in horror as Tom casually took it apart while drinking coffee and listening to rock music. "Your quantum drive is too complicated," he told a group of tentacled engineers from Proxima Centauri. "Look, if you just connect these two parts directly and add a bicycle bell here. Don't ask why, it just works better. You get 75% more power output." The Council began receiving alarming reports from all sectors. Humans turned our meditation chamber into a popcorn maker. They modified our war machines to generate clean energy and make smoothies. They're using our planet scanning technology to perfect pizza crust. They keep asking if things are edible that clearly shouldn't be edible. Dr. White, now the leading expert on human behavior, tried to explain to the Council, "You don't understand. They're not trying to be difficult. They genuinely enjoy solving problems in unexpected ways. And the most terrifying part, they're usually right." The final straw came when a group of human children visited an alien ship and started asking questions that had never occurred to the ship's designers in thousands of years of development. Why does it need to be so complicated? What happens if you press all the buttons at once? Can it play games? Does it come in different colors? The Council decided immediate action was needed. They began installing warning beacons around Earth's solar system. But unlike traditional warning beacons that protected space travelers from dangerous species, these had a unique message. "Warning, human space. They will try to improve your technology." "Caution. Humans will ask why your ship works that way." "Danger. Exposure to humans may result in questioning everything you know." Dr. White watched from his research station as another alien ship fled Earth orbit after Tom suggested a few small improvements to their propulsion system. "Maybe we should be less helpful," he suggested to Tom. "Why?" Tom asked, already sketching modifications to the coffee maker that would apparently let it bend spacetime. "We're just trying to make things better. By ignoring all known laws of physics and engineering." "Laws are more like guidelines," Tom replied with a grin. "Besides, the physics still work. We just make them work more creatively." Dr. White added another note to his ever-growing report. "Humans don't see technology as sacred or fixed. To them, everything can be improved, usually by making it simpler or by adding features it was never meant to have." In orbit, another warning beacon activated. "No TIC. Entering human territory. They will probably turn your ship into something fun." The most worrying part, more and more alien ships were choosing to ignore the warnings, curious to see what innovations these strange humans might suggest. The galaxy was changing, one human-inspired modification at a time. And Tom Miller still hadn't run out of ideas for that wrench of his. The Grand Council chamber looked very different from 6 months ago. Gone were the overly complicated floating chairs, replaced by simple anti-gravity cushions designed by Tom Miller that were, annoyingly, 3 times more comfortable and used half the power. The massive holographic display now ran on what humans called a much more sensible system, which somehow involved an old Nintendo controller for navigation. Council member first stood at the center of the chamber, addressing the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. His formal robes now included pockets, another human innovation that the aliens had grudgingly admitted was quite useful. After extensive study and considerable debate, first announced, "We have reached a decision regarding Earth's status in the galactic community. The chamber fell silent. Even the crystal beings stopped their usual musical humming. Earth is hereby classified as a protected anomaly. First continued. Not because they need our protection, but because the rest of the galaxy occasionally needs protection from their enthusiasm for improvement. Dr. White, now promoted to Chief of Human Studies, displayed his latest findings. Humans have successfully modified technology from 27 different alien species. In every case, they made the technology simpler, more efficient, and somehow more fun to use. The data scrolled across the screen, showing dozens of human improvements to alien technology. Faster than light drives that now also make excellent toast. Quantum computers that double as gaming consoles. Planet scanning arrays that can find the best pizza in any solar system. Defensive shields that create light shows synchronized to music. But the most remarkable thing, Dr. White added, is that they're teaching their children to think the same way. Human schools now offer classes in creative xenotechnology and interstellar innovation. In the corner, Tom Miller stood quietly, still holding his famous wrench. He had been invited as Earth's unofficial ambassador, mainly because he'd already improved most of the Council's technology anyway. The wrench had become something of a legend in galactic circles. Some species even started carrying similar tools, calling them human luck sticks. Furthermore, First continued, we are establishing a new department, the Office of Human-Inspired Innovation, because as much as it pains us to admit it, their chaotic approach to technology actually works. The crystal beings chimed in harmony, their way of showing agreement. Their civilization had recently adopted several human innovations, including something they called jazz crystal architecture, which somehow improved their buildings' structural integrity by making them less mathematically perfect. Tom raised his hand. Does this mean I can finally show you guys my plans for the galaxy-wide coffee delivery system? Several council members visibly flinched. They'd learned that when Tom Miller had plans, it usually meant some fundamental law of physics was about to be politely but firmly ignored. Actually, First replied carefully, we were hoping you might look at our transport system first. It's been running perfectly for 10,000 years, so by human standards, it's probably due for an upgrade. Tom grinned. I've got some ideas involving rubber bands and what we humans call a slide whistle. Trust me, it'll make much more sense when you see it. Dr. White quickly added another note to his ongoing report. Humans continue to treat the most advanced technology in the galaxy as if it were a child's construction set. Most worryingly, they're usually right about the improvements. As the council session ended, First approached Tom privately. We've been studying humans for months now, and we still don't understand how your species thinks. How do you come up with these ideas? Tom shrugged, twirling his wrench. We just ask ourselves, wouldn't it be cool if? And then try to make it happen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it explodes, but we learn something either way. First nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that's what the rest of the galaxy has been missing. The courage to ask, wouldn't it be cool if? Exactly. Tom brightened. Speaking of which, has anyone ever tried adding cup holders to those fancy space suits of yours? And so, the galaxy began its slow adaptation to human innovation, one impossible improvement at a time. The warning beacons around Earth were kept in place, but their messages were quietly updated to read, Welcome to human space, where that's impossible is just another way of saying challenge accepted.